Elon Musk and his DOGE team dispelling attacks from Democrats about what they are up to in their quest to slash government waste. Musk flanked by CEOs of tech companies, engineers, and an actual rocket scientist to explain how they are trying to turn the antiquated federal government into the Apple Store.
This is a revolution, and I think it might be the biggest revolution in government since the original revolution. But at the end of the day, America is going to be in much better shape. What we're trying to do is ensure that people do receive their benefits in the future. And you can only receive your benefits if the country is operating in a healthy and competent way.
We really believe that the government can have an Apple Store-like experience. Beautifully designed, great user experience, modern systems.
That all the retirement stuff is still done by paper in a process that looks identical to what occurred in the 1950s. Like if you took a snapshot of the mine when it first started in the 50s to today, it looks the same.
Musk and his team there detailing all the wasteful spending that they have been finding.
The sheer amount of waste and fraud in the government, it is astonishing. It's mind-blowing.
700 different IT systems today at NIH.
700 different IT systems.
IT software systems. They can't speak to each other.
We learned 40% of the phone calls that they get are from fraudsters.
40%?
That's right. Almost half.
It's 300 million under the age of 11 and over 300 million to over the age of 120.
Definitely.
Small business loans.
Correct.
Yes. The oldest American is 114. So it's safe to say if their age is 115 or above, they're fake. Or they should be in the Guinness Book of World Records.
Those enlightening moments fly in the face of the picture Democrats and the media have been painting. You may remember how DOGE members were called techno-fascists, inexperienced, and even a goon squad. Musk also hitting back against violent attacks on Tesla as more than 200 protests are planned this weekend.
Tesla is a peaceful company that has made great cars, great products. That's all it's done. Hasn't harmed anyone. And yet people are committing violence. They're firebombing Tesla dealerships. They're shooting guns into stores. They're threatening people. They're issuing death threats against me and other Tesla personnel. What are they doing this for? Why? And what's happening, it seems to me, is they're being fed propaganda by the far left. And they believe it. It's really unfortunate.
Wow. For so many of us, Jesse, watching this last night, our minds were blown at some of these revelations and what they've been able to dig up.
Well, first, I thought all these Doge boys were going to be like wearing hoodies and have like one-hitters hanging from their mouth. And they're like really successful innovators that have left their successful companies to take a sabbatical to save the country. And all the Democrats can do is heckle. They're like bleacher creatures. They're just yelling stuff from the stands. They have a hot dog in one hand, a Miller Lite here, and they're like, "You're too slow." I mean, meanwhile, these people need like wheelchairs to get out of the stadium. They don't have any ideas, the Democrats. What's their idea to cut waste, fraud, and abuse? What's their idea to cut spending? This is like when your wife spills wine and then she yells at you because the way you're cleaning it up is wrong. Babe, you spilled the wine. I'll clean it up the way I want to clean it up. Why aren't Democrats upset about fraud? They're just upset about the way we're finding the fraud. Like, we're injecting swallows with Coke to see if it makes them horny. Yes, Coke makes everybody horny. Why can't we just hold hands and agree that some of this stuff is ridiculous? The Democrats don't run their own business like this. What Democrat business hires people and never fires people? What Democrat business just gets bilked out of millions of dollars and never stops it? What Democrat business gives every employee 2 credit cards? None. Democrats never run their own businesses that way, but for some reason tolerate what's going on in the federal government like this. I would want FEMA to be faster. I would want the Pentagon not to get bilked. I would want Medicare and Social Security saved. We can agree on that. But for some reason, Democrats are fighting tooth and nail against this. It's almost like they think the government's theirs. And when any Republican takes power, he's leasing the White House. Like if he wants to make any changes, like you have to call the super. Like you can't do anything. You can't paint it. You can't irrigate the lawn. Anything needs to be done, you have to have the Democrats do it for them. That's not how we run this country.
Jessica, the co-founder of Airbnb stuck out in that moment when he was detailing the amount of fraud that he has seen since getting in there. He's obviously in charge of the overhaul of the retirement system for federal workers. How could Democrats have any issue with them getting in there and cleaning up these messes?
If the messes are authentic, then absolutely get in there and clean them up. But the DOGE that we saw yesterday is not the DOGE that's actually been in action. So first and foremost, where is Amy Gleason? Because Amy Gleason is supposed to be in charge of DOGE. And I don't know if she's still on vacation in Mexico or what's it. Where's Big Balls? Right? We just got the Airbnb guy and the guy who wants to make it into the Apple store. But where are the people that we've been reading about for months that are actually in our Social Security payments? There were, I'm sure, some things that they were talking about that are absolutely true. 40% seems really high in terms of the percentage of fraudster calls into Social Security. But what Musk and co didn't address is that they are closing Social Security offices all over the country, and that Republican representatives like Tom Cole from Oklahoma has to call Musk personally to say, please spare my district. That means, as Brett said, the 94-year-old grandma can't get through to someone, can't even walk down the street or get in her car, have someone drive her to go in there and deal with it. They threw this insane bit of misinformation, lie, whatever you want to call it, about that survey that cost nearly $1 billion for the National Park Service. So if you looked under the hood a little, what that actually is, and you should be noted that the entire budget is $3 million. So he is alleging they spent a third of it on this survey that could have been done on SurveyMonkey, only 10 questions long. So the Interior Department oversees an in-house consulting group for federal agencies for $130 million. And one of the contracts that they have is 4 surveys. That doesn't mean that's an $830 million survey. That means that somewhere within the government, someone is actually running surveys. God forbid. He didn't talk about cuts to CDC funding for measles outbreaks, which we're undergoing right now in Texas. No one seems to care. He didn't talk about cuts to HUD. That means that people that are searching for emergency or transitional housing will be out of a home and be homeless by April 1st. And guess what? That's going to really affect veterans in the Hudson Valley. We didn't hear anything about that. So yes, it was a beautiful presentation. I certainly enjoyed it, but I have many outlying questions.
I was wondering where Big Balls was, too.
Yeah, he was missing. I've been excited to meet him.
Me too.
How do you know not one of them isn't Big Balls?
Because Big Balls is 19, I think, and those men were of older age.
Judge, there was already a lot of public support for DOGE heading into this, but
look, there is tremendous support for this. And you know what I love about Jessica and what the Democrats are saying? I heard a Democrat, I think it was a congresswoman, who said, "I'm worried that someone's not going to get a Social Security check." What does that tell you? It tells you that they don't have one person who has not yet gotten their Social Security.
I have one.
Oh, maybe you have one.
No,
maybe
there
it's a
are
story
more
of
than that.
one. But let me just finish my point. Let me just finish my. I didn't interrupt you, Jessica.
That's true. You were right.
The truth is that America has never felt better about this country being on the right track, and that is because there is so much waste, fraud, and abuse. And you know, Obama talked about it, but didn't do anything about it. The only people Joe Biden fired were the nurses and the police officers and the people in the military who helped us out during COVID, but he wanted to fire them because they wouldn't get the vaccine. So now that we've got real professionals and we now have a face to DOGE, we know what they look like, we know who they are. They're not in hoodies, and they're not taking coke, or they're not doing all the stuff we imagined that the Democrats had us believing. They are doing a job where they're pointing to facts that the Democrats cannot counter. Number one, if you've got 700 different software systems that don't even talk to each other in one National Institute of Health, that is corruption. That is not a fraud. That is corruption. This is not money that is just going into a garbage can. This is money that is going to people illegally. There is fraud. And the only people complaining about this, stopping or investigating the waste, fraud, and abuse are the people who want to protect it. And, someone said, the Democrat hires and they never fire. Well, that's because they don't have to worry about it. They get all this money, like Stacey Abrams got $2 billion. Who's she going to fire? I mean, they just have these foot soldiers that they keep funding. And it's about time that we recognize that there are things that they are publishing on a website that anyone can access that shows where the fraud and the abuse is.
Did the DOGE dudes, Greg, shatter the Democrat narrative?
I have to hand it to Bret Baier and Special Report. That's like the best thing I've ever seen on this network. It sounds like an exaggeration, but I was. Sorry, Jesse.
Seriously.
Yeah, Waters World was right up there.
Shows.
But if you want to learn how government works, and why following the money tells you everything about incentives, self-preservation, fraud, and in this case, patriotism, because all of those guys are not doing it for the money. They're doing it for the country. I'm pretty politically aware. I didn't know about that mine in Pennsylvania until DOGE. I had no idea. That's like, you're living in an apartment and you want to go check on the heating. So you go down to the basement and you find an old guy shoveling coal. I mean, it is nobody, like I'd say 90% of the population had no idea that existed, and now they do. Everybody's gone through the list, the Social Security, the computer systems, the Treasury, with no oversight on payouts. 1.5% of workers have been fired. You could round that to zero. I know it's like somebody, but you're talking a huge number. The money being cut from science is being redirected from administrations to actual science. There's so much stuff there. But I wonder why the attacks, also the arguments from the Dems and then the violence from their minions. I don't think Democrats, I should say that. I don't think leftists are used to people operating from good faith. That a collection of wildly successful people would come together out of pure love for the country to save the country from financial ruin. So they project their own instincts onto everybody else. There must be some ill will that is driving DOGE. It's got to be greed. These are billionaires. They could never fathom an altruistic endeavor. And this one is clearly the biggest one in recent history. Also, if you're constantly in drama mode, and I would say all of this is drama mode, acting instead of doing, then you have to believe there's something underlying this DOGE performance, because if you're an actor, you act all day and you assume everybody else has a false front too. So they just assume that there must be something going on with DOGE that is covering up a more devious thing. But if you look at the DOGE segments, analytical, dry, plainly stated, there were no what ifs. There were just what is. And the last thing I'll say about the violence, because we haven't touched on that, when somebody does something that you don't like, oftentimes you don't like the person when you should just not like the thing that they did. And what the left does is it confuses the two. So I could support DOGE. You could not like the fact that I support DOGE, but you shouldn't hate me for that. What you're seeing is people going after the individuals for their beliefs. I don't like that Elon Musk is fronting DOGE, so I don't like him. Generally, as human beings, you don't like the act. You don't go after the person. I believe a famous Christian once said that. I think it was hate the sin and not the sinner. Anyway, this is something, DOGE, that both parties, Republicans and Democrats, never would have attempted until somebody named Trump came along and said, why not? We're modernizing the government. It scares the hell out of the corrupt dinosaurs who can feel the heat of this orange asteroid coming at them. And it's Trump.
Wow, corrupt dinosaurs. Take that, Jessica.
And orange asteroids.
And orange
I love today. Yeah. And irrigating the lawn. I wanted to go back to that.
I'm for legal irrigation.
Well, let's start here with an unprecedented look inside Elon Musk's operation to slim down our federal government. Musk and members of his team at DOGE sat down for an exclusive interview with Bret Baier last night. It did not disappoint. Elon Musk laying out the ultimate goal for DOGE.
Our goal is to reduce the deficit by $1 trillion. We want to reduce the spending by eliminating waste and fraud, reduce the spending by 15%, which seems really quite achievable. The government is not efficient, and there's a lot of waste and fraud.
All those people around Elon Musk, well, those were members of the top DOGE team, some of his engineers, many of whom have experience leading multi-billion-dollar corporations like X, Microsoft, Airbnb. They're at the top of their industry, and they've seen this government waste for themselves.
We routinely encounter wastes of $1 billion or more, casually. For example, like the simple survey that was literally 10-question survey that you could do with SurveyMonkey cost you about $10,000.
The first thing that got me really excited about DOGE was learning basically the state of government computers. By some estimates, government IT costs about $100 billion, and it's funding systems that are over 50 years old.
There are over 15 million people that are over the age of 120 that are marked as alive in the Social Security system.
It turns out there is actually a mine in Pennsylvania that houses every paper document for the retirement process in the government. So the process takes many months, and we're going to make it just many days.
Casual taxpayer billions, just toss it here and here. That's what they found. Well, one DOGE engineer, Tyler Hassan, says he gave up running multiple businesses to help serve his country.
Last thing, do you guys all see this as a patriotic duty? I mean, is that really what this is about?
It's essential.
Very much so. I do, 100%. I was running 5 businesses in Houston, and I left that. I left great people to do this, and my wonderful wife said, go for it. And here I am. But I feel like this is me giving back to the country.
Lisa, this was fascinating for so many reasons. If you do a ChatGPT search of what these individuals have been called, you find techno-authoritarian idealists, out-of-touch disruptors, unelected shadow policymakers, cult of personality operatives, or my favorite, billionaire enablers of privatized governance. Well, they seem pretty methodical, smart, and people who I'd want working with my money as it's taxpayer money.
Yeah, I mean, I would call them patriots, public servants, people who don't need to be doing this, but chose to do it to make the country better. To your point, Kaylee, the media wants us to believe that DOGE is just a bunch of 18-year-olds playing Call of Duty in their parents' basement, right? and what we saw is, tech billionaire, Airbnb founder, CEOs, CFOs, rocket scientists who are all in DOGE. And it's not just about reducing the federal workforce and cutting spending. It's about making the government more efficient as well. You've got bringing a business mind to government and changing that dynamic. And I think one thing that people don't discuss as much is the Biden administration. Joe Biden grew the federal workforce by around 5%. And one thing that was noted last night was that only 0.15% of the federal workforce have been given reduction in force notices. So look at those two different numbers, the amount that Joe Biden has grew the federal government and just the slight reduction in the federal workforce we've seen so far. And a lot of those employees were probationary employees. They're supposed to be in a trial period. Those are most of the ones that have been fired. So, the media's coverage of this has been so antithetical to what we saw last night.
So that was the part that stood out to me, because the media narrative has been these are callous, heartless people just getting rid of 75% of the federal government. Well, wait, let's bring in the guy who gives us the actual number of who's been terminated.
President Trump's been very clear. It's scalpel, not hatchet, and that's the way it's getting done. And then once those decisions are made, there's a very heavy focus on being generous, being caring, being compassionate, and treating everyone with dignity and respect. And if you look at how people have started to leave the government, it is largely through voluntary means. And you've heard a lot of news about rifts, about people getting fired. At this moment in time, less than 0.15, not 1.5, less than 0.15 of the federal workforce has actually been given a RIF notice.
Pretty interesting, Larry.
When I interviewed Elon a couple months ago, again and again during that interview, he said, I want to save America from bankruptcy. It's a very important point. He doesn't get credit for it, as you said in your opening. The media won't give him any credit. But that was his principle. He is a patriot, as Lisa said. I want to save America from bankruptcy. bankruptcy. So they're finding $4 billion a day so far. By the way, it's all up on a website. It's completely transparent. They've found $130 billion of waste, fraud, and abuse up to now. He's going to stay the course. He's probably going to do it for at least another year. That's what he told me. He thinks $500 billion of savings is something they can easily find. He thinks they can get to $1 trillion if they stay with it until the middle of next year. And by the way, very important point, you know, there's a lot of talk about we're putting together a big reconciliation budget package, which will cut taxes and will cut spending in order to grow the economy and keep the inflation rate back down. Look, they are going to use his savings and put it into a rescission package. That means essentially take back the money that was supposed to have been spent. It's like ripping up a check, if you will. So this is going to have profound budget implications. It's also going to make all these federal agencies better and more efficient, as they said. And it's also going to allow us not only to stay out of bankruptcy, but my favorite thought, Kayleigh, it will allow us even bigger tax cuts to help the middle class along the way. That's what Elon Musk is doing, and he is a patriot. And somebody needed to do this 1,000,000 years ago, but at least he's doing it now.
And Molly, from a communications perspective, someone needed to get out front and put faces to these DOGE individuals and put numbers. And we heard that. We heard 15 million people in over 120 who are on the Social Security rolls. 40% of the calls coming in are fraudsters. These are hard numbers, facts, and now we have faces behind DOGE.
Oh my, it was so fascinating to see these personalities. Brett did an amazing job kind of bringing out who these individuals were and why they wanted to be a part of this. And one of the things that many of these guys, you know, there's this group of like brilliant individuals that understand technology, and what they talked about was the lack of technology in government and the problems it causes. My favorite part of the interview was with Brad Smith. He talked about enhancing healthcare. He says there's 700 different IT systems today at NIH. They can't speak to each other. They have 27 different CAOs. And so when you think about making great medical discoveries, you have to connect the data. So it's interesting to think about what the next step is. Besides finding the waste, besides finding the fraud, solving the problem and creating, you know, a better future.
Yeah, you know, and I do want to do a little blast from the past here on Friday. So let's bring in someone from 2011, President Obama on spending cuts. Watch this.
Everyone knows that getting rid of the deficit will require some tough decisions. And that includes cutting back on billions of dollars in programs that a lot of people care about. But what should be easy is getting rid of the pointless waste and stupid spending that doesn't benefit anybody. Waste we should be getting rid of, even if we didn't have a deficit.
I mean, Marie, that sounds like DOGE.
I think, well, look, I will be very clear. I support better government efficiency. I think that government could do a lot of things better. The question is DOGE doing it in the right way? And yes, they have a lot of numbers up online but by what Larry said, but a lot of those have already been found to be incorrect or outdated or just the absolutely wrong numbers. They don't have completely transparent numbers up online. But I was watching an interview on another network this morning about a woman in West Virginia. She voted for President Trump. She's fully supportive of him. She is one of these probationary employees, but all of her evaluations from her managers have been stellar, the highest you can get. And yet she was fired by DOGE for poor performance, because legally that's the only way they can fire people who are probationary, by saying it's for poor performance. So there's a flip side to this. Do you balance the budget and cut the deficit by actually tackling entitlements, by looking at these tax cuts, much of which go to high-income earners? Or do you do what DOGE is doing, which is Larry, let me finish, I didn't interrupt you. Or do you do it by what DOGE is doing, which is firing veterans at the VA, people who work curing cancer and working on vaccines, right? They are going after government employees who make 50,000. But Kayleigh, those are real Americans.
And to Larry's point,
and they are getting. Wait, let me finish.
Got a tax break all the way down to the lowest.
Kayleigh, those are real Americans, and they are getting fired. And many of them supported Donald Trump. And so politically and morally, at the end of this,
so where do you want to cut, Marie?
We will all.
Marie, where do you want to cut?
I think there's a lot you. First of all, I don't think that these tax cuts for the wealthy
by
should
definition
be.
is a short-term period. It's a trial period.
But Lisa, you can't be fired
That's
by
the whole point of a
someone's
employee.
But in probation, the only way you can be fired is by saying you are poorly performing, and these people are not.
But Marie,
these people are
where's
not.
the Democrat cutting package? Like, where's the proposal?
I can name 5 places we should cut.
Here's the
And
point.
do you think
Can I
it's
make-
fair for America's toddlers to be saddled
Do
with
you
your
think
debt?
it's fair for veterans to be fired by Elon Musk?
Can
Do
I
you
ma-
think that's okay?
Can I
Do we
make
all
a
think
point?
that's okay?
Look, the GAO, General Accounting
Do
Office.
we all think that's okay?
Last
Are you okay
year-
with that, Larry?
Listen, the GAO last year came up with the number of $535 billion in waste, fraud, and abuse. That's the GAO. That was during the Biden years. The GAO this year came up with a number, another $135 billion. What Elon Musk is discovering is no secret. The problem, Marie, is simply this. All these studies have been gathering dust on the shelves, and they have not been used actually to be
But that's not what
implemented.
they're getting rid of.
Everyone-
They're not
it-
getting
it-
rid of waste.
Everyone
That's not what they're
Guys, you
cutting.
gotta
And
go,
you're
so I
on the
gotta cut
wrong
this off.
you're on the wrong
The
side
fact
of an
is this.
80-20
That's not what
issue.
they're
Marie.
cutting.
We can bring up an anecdotal account from another network, and we can also bring up the 0.15% number of those who have actually been
Those are
fired.
real people.
And we can bring up the fact that Democrats have yet to put forward a plan to cut spending. Instead, they would like for my 2-year-old and 5-year-old to pay their debts. Ask yourself if that's fair.
In our final installment of our spotlight on the Department of Government Efficiency, Brett speaks one-on-one with Elon Musk about what issues keep him up at night, the scrutiny he is facing, his involvement in politics outside of DOGE, and whether or not he thinks his work with the department can have lasting effects.
Here's Keith on X says, executive actions can be undone with the next president. What is the team doing to ensure the government waste and overregulation is permanently reduced? I assume you're working with Congress. That's part of it, but...
Yeah, we certainly would like a lot of what we're doing to be permanently enshrined in law. But a lot of the changes we're making are very basic things that I think are likely to remain in place, such as the improvements to the Treasury financial system to have a better understanding of how and why payments are made. So the fact that payments now must have a payment code that corresponds to a congressional appropriation and must have an explanation for the payment and someone to call to ask about the payment. So we made those changes to the system. They weren't there before. I think those changes will remain. So all these changes that we're doing, like the one I just mentioned, will enable the government to actually pass an audit. It's at such a basic level that you have to stand back and recalibrate just how bad things can be, because you think it can't possibly be that bad, and it is. It'll basically blow your mind. There's no way that any commercial company could possibly survive if it operated like the federal government.
You're still involved in politics. You were big in the election, obviously in Pennsylvania. Now, I guess you're in the Wisconsin Supreme Court race. Why plug in?
Well, the Democrats are trying to redraw the districts in Wisconsin. And we're trying to stop the Democrats from gerrymandering Wisconsin to remove 2 House seats. That's what this whole Supreme Court justice case is about. So I really want to emphasize people out there, if you're in Wisconsin, go out and vote. You can do early voting for the Supreme Court. If you have friends and family in Wisconsin, please urge them to vote for Brad Schimmel. If we don't, we could lose control of the House, and all of the government reforms could be shut down.
Finally, what's the biggest thing for you that keeps you up at night?
Well, there's a lot of things, that I suppose, that I worry about, but and some of these things will seem esoteric to people. The birth rate is very low in almost every country, and it's something, unless that changes, civilization will disappear. America had the lowest birth rate, I believe, ever. That was last year. Places like Korea, the birth rate is 1/3 replacement rate. So that means in 3 generations, Korea will be 3 or 4% of its current size. And nothing seems to be turning that around. Humanity is dying. And people, it's just not something we evolved to react to. And I worry generally about the strength of America. America is the central column that holds up all of Western civilization. So if you if we've got the the temple of Western civilization. America is the central column. If that column fails, it's all over. You can't run off to New Zealand or some other place. It's over. So either we strengthen that column and make sure America is strong and will be strong for a long time, or that roof's coming down.
You know, I think we got into detail today about what you all are doing and maybe demystified some of that. For the people who look at you and your business sense about SpaceX or Starlink, can you tell them specifically there's not a conflict of interest in how you're doing it, what you're doing, and the contracts that you're getting with the government?
Everything I do is under extreme scrutiny.
Every day?
Yeah. So there's not an action I can take that doesn't get scrutiny 6 ways to Sunday. Every action that the DOGE team does is public. We put it on the website. It's the most amount of transparency there's been about any government thing ever. It would be, even if I wanted to, I couldn't get away with it. In fact, it's actually disadvantageous for me to be in the government, not advantageous.
Yeah.
If I wasn't in the government, I could lobby, and I could push for things that are advantageous to my companies, and probably get it, probably receive them. My companies are suffering because I'm in the government. You just pointed that out a moment ago.
Right.
Do you think it helps sales if dealerships are being firebombed? Of course not. And Tesla customers are being intimidated all over the country and all over Europe.
Mm-hmm.
Does that help Tesla? I mean, you had Tim Waltz, who's a huge jerk, running around on stage with the Tesla stock price where the stock price had gone in half, and he was overjoyed. What an evil thing to do. What a creep, what a jerk. Like, who derives joy from that? And it was pointed out to him that actually, Minnesota State Pension Fund is a major investor in Tesla. But he didn't care. He was so overjoyed by Tesla stock going in half. Does that sound like a good person to you? I don't think so.
You know, when I was growing up, we didn't have internet, then we didn't have cell phones, then we got them, then we got the Apple phone and all the technology that I've just seen in my lifetime.
Yeah.
The fact that we are where we are, if you're talking to an audience, where are we in 5 years? Where are we in 10 years?
I do think there's the potential for a great future. As long as America remains the land of freedom and opportunity. So freedom means that the government does not infringe upon your personal liberties, that you can do what you want as long as it doesn't harm another person. Land of opportunity means that you succeed on the basis of your merits, on how hard you work and how good you are at your job. Those fundamental principles are what will ensure a great future. And that's what President Trump is committed to doing. It's what the DOGE team is committed to doing. And if we succeed, I think we'll have a wonderful future.
Well, Elon, we really appreciate the time. And I think we dispelled some rumors and got into some very specifics that people wanted to hear. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Let's bring in Mark Thiessen, Fox News contributor. Mark, we got so much feedback on this incredible interview, and I think most people were just really happy to see the veil lifted and get a look at these people who aren't the 20-something kids that they'd been hearing all about.
Yeah, it's amazing, and it's so great for the DOGE effort and for the country to meet these people and see these dedicated American citizens who've come and taken time from their busy careers to try and save the American taxpayers from waste, fraud, and abuse. I mean, the GAO reported that in 2023, they uncovered $236 billion in waste, fraud, and abuse, $175 billion in money that went to dead people and people who were no longer eligible for benefits, and $45 billion that they just lost, that they couldn't account for. In some years, it was $521 billion, $500 billion. That's the equivalent of all the corporate taxes that come in a single year. And that's just scratching the surface. That's without the forensic accounting that DOGE is doing. We've got to stop doing that. We've got to stop wasting that money, and you put it back towards saving the taxpayers' money, or put it towards public interest, what it's supposed to be spent on, which is benefiting the American people.
Yeah, even the crew on Morning Joe had some praise for this. Listen to what they said.
I think Elon Musk going out before cameras and talking and saying this is what we're doing is a good thing. But to act like that this has been some well thought out, measured approach is just not believable. What works in government? Yeah. And I learned this my first day in Washington, D.C., is not what works in corporations.
Government is actually not a business. It doesn't need change with a chainsaw.
All right, so some debate there over what they're saying, but do you think that this interview maybe they should have done sooner?
Yeah, I mean, well, they wanted to get some work done. You got to lift up the hood and see what's there before you can go on cameras and talk about it. They've been spending the last, we're only 65 days into this administration, so they've only been at it for about 2 months. But this is also, it's very important that Democrats understand this is a 70-30 issue. I mean, there was a Harvard CAPS poll that just came out. 72% of Americans believe there should be an agency uncovering waste, fraud, and abuse. 70% think that there is waste, fraud, and abuse. And 70% support cutting $1 trillion from the federal budget. That's only 15% of spending. That's what Elon Musk is trying to do. But if you do it, you cut the deficit in half by that simple act. So God bless DOGE, and the Democrats better get behind this because it's a very popular effort.
And yet you still have some Democrats coming after it. You had Hillary Clinton mention in an op-ed, smart reforms could make federal agencies more efficient and effective. During the Clinton administration, my husband's Reinventing Government initiative worked with Congress to thoughtfully streamline bureaucracy. In many ways, it was the opposite of the Trump administration's slash and burn approach. Today, they are not reinventing government. They're wrecking it. I looked into, this program she's referencing, and, what they did, saved some of the federal budget, but it took a really long time, years. It also involved having federal workers reimagine their jobs. I guess the only difference here that might be relevant today is that a lot of the DOGE cuts are not going before Congress. Whereas what happened under the Clinton administration, that was congressionally approved. Do you think that DOGE needs to put some of these cuts before Congress so that they stick and a future Democratic administration doesn't come in and undo all the work that they've just done?
Well, I think what they're going to have to do is some of the things you can do through executive action, as Elon Musk said yesterday. Congress hasn't mandated waste, fraud, and abuse. If you can find waste, fraud, and abuse, then the executive branch has the power to eliminate that. But some of it's going to have to go before Congress. I mean, for example, eliminating USAID is going to take congressional action. So it's going to be a mix of those two things. But also keep in mind, the founder of DOGE was Barack Obama. In 2014, he founded the U.S. Digital Service, which was a bunch of tech bros he brought in to deploy what he called SWAT teams across the government. Yeah. And so Trump has just taken that and taken it to the next level.
And what they keep finding is really just so stunning, and it's fascinating to watch all of the different numbers come out and all the waste and fraud they're identifying on seemingly a daily basis. Mark Thiessen, thank you so much for being here. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Jackie.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.